Call this meeting in order. Mayor Martini, can you please lead us in the pledge?
Please join me in the pledge to the greatest flag in the world.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome, Commissioners and City Council Sparks. We will go ahead with the roll call, please, Madam Secretary. City of Reno roll call.
Breckus.
I believe she's on the phone.
Councilmember Breckus, can you hear us? We'll come back to her. She's dialed in at this point, however.
Okay.
Dewar.
Here.
Delgado.
Here.
McKenzie. Here. Jordan absent at this time. Bob Zine. Shivi absent at this time.
Sounds like we have a quorum. Commissioner Lucy.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Roll call, please. Washoe County.
Thank you. Kitty Dung, Chair, is absent. Bob Lucy, Vice Chair.
Here.
Marcia Burke-Bigler. Here. Amy Herman.
Here.
Vaughn Hartung.
Here.
County Manager John Slaughter. Here. Assistant District Attorney Paul Liparelli. Here. And Nancy Parent, County Clerk. You have a quorum, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Madam Clerk.
Mayor Martini.
Madam Clerk for City Sparks, please.
Mayor Martini,
Here.
Council Members Ratty, absent. Lawson,
Here.
Smith, Bybee, absent. Schmidt, absent. City Attorney Adams, absent. And City Manager Driscoll. Here. Not having a quorum, but we expect others to be coming in shortly.
Okay. Sounds good. And did Councilwoman Breckus jump on the phone there? If she hasn't, just for the council to be aware, we have 4, so if she doesn't answer, then one leaves the room, we'd lose quorum. Just remember that. Madam Secretary, do we have public comment?
We have no public comment at this time, Mr. Vice Mayor.
We'll close public comment. Moving on to item E, approval of the agenda.
To approve the Reno
I have a
portion of this
motion.
agenda?
I have a second. All those in favor say aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Commissioner Lucy.
Can I get a motion to accept the?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Mayor Martini.
We do not have a quorum, so we'll pass for now.
We're back. Thank you, sir. Approval of the minutes. City Council, Reno City Council.
Motion to approve?
Got a I have a motion and a second.
Councilmember Breckus is
Councilwoman
present
Breckus.
at this time.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Commissioner Lucy.
Can I get approval of the minutes, please? Oh, wait, we don't have any movements. Yes. We're okay, sorry.
Okay. It's not on your agenda. Okay.
Nope.
And City of Sparks is still no quorum. We'll move on to item G, G1, update presentation regarding the flood project. Mr. J. Aldean.
Good morning, members of the Washoe County government. See, I have 3 minutes to make my presentation. I'm overjoyed. We're at a somewhat historic point right now with the flood project, and this is a good time for an update. A perspective, had I not fallen down in the snow helping my son load his truck this morning, I would have had a T-shirt that said, building in the floodplain is like pitching a tent in the middle of a highway when there are no cars coming. And that is a quote. Actually, I got it from ASFPM, which is the Association of State Floodplain Managers. Just want to keep that as a perspective. So, what is a floodplain? 1929, there's a floodplain right there. Let's build in it. And that's exactly what we did. That whole area is developed except for the small exclusion of the UNR property that the Ag Experimental Station is located. You can see the airport, you know exactly where you are. You can see the Vista area and where the Truckee River enters the lower canyon. So what causes this problem? This is the 1997 extent of flooding. Now-
Mr. JLD,
Oh, no one.
can you pause for a second? I see we at City of Sparks has quorum, if allow them to get on record, if you don't mind, for a pause. Mayor Martini, if you'd like to call your roll.
Madam Clerk, could you do the roll again, please?
Councilmember Ratty?
Here.
Councilmember Friday? Here. We now have a quorum.
Thank you.
Did you need approval for the agenda on your guys' end, Mayor Martini?
Yes, approval of the agenda.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed unanimously.
Do you guys need anything else approved, minutes or such?
Do we need minutes, Teresa?
No, we've already.
Okay, good. We're good to go then.
Perfect. Thank you. Yes, Mr. Aldean, carry forward. Thank you.
So, we have a problem. It floods here. You might know that this is not just a problem. It is one of the most difficult problems that engineers can even tackle because of the complexity of this floodplain. We had work done in the early 60s that dynamited out the Vista Reefs, which is the area just adjacent to the Tumwharf plant and then on down the lower canyon. That had a tendency of destabilizing the embankments of the river and of Steamboat Creek. And it didn't really do a whole lot for the flooding. As you'll see later on in the presentation, we've had a number of floods and they've been egregious. I said that it was a very complex problem hydraulically. Let me tell you, as a rookie engineer, I actually worked on this problem, thinking about how to do the calculation. We are now advanced 30 years of experience, at least in my experience, and we now have the ability to use a two-dimensional model and actually calculate in one model, starting at Verdi and going all the way down to the lower canyon or to Vista, and we have the ability to now calculate it using the water surface elevation using one model. Now, this is something you have not seen before. In fact, I have not shown it to anybody with exception of your staff. Your senior technical staff have seen this. You'll notice a couple of things about this. You'll notice that starting in Reno downtown, you notice that there's two travels. Well, water breaks out of the downtown Reno portion and it travels straight to the airport. It goes directly. We notice that you've got a flooding associated with Paradise Park. That comes down and it goes to the east towards the new boy, I tell you, words are escaping me this morning. But towards Sparks, Legends is what I'm thinking of. And of course you have the flooding in the downtown area. You'll notice one thing, that flooding in the downtown area is not anywhere near in proportion to the size of the flooding that occurs in what we call the Truckee Meadows. Truckee Meadows basically is the portion of the Truckee River that lies east of 395 to Vista. And then, of course, you have all that area in the south in Reno that floods as well. Well, the model now captures that, and I'm fairly comfortable that we've got a very good handle on what the water surface elevation is. That helps us, and it helped us in determining what the flood fees were going to be that the flood board voted on back in October. Just to show you, you notice that a couple of the runways were opened. If you look right there, that, I believe, is a runway of the airport. This is during the height of the 1997 event. It shows that the runways were open. So what happened? Where was that American jet you've all seen? Well, you've all seen it. There it is. It was up against the terminal. That's where it floods, not in the runways. So just because the model may look a little sketchy right there in around the airport, it's still, I'm pretty sure it's pretty accurate. And when you compare it to the inundation limits of the 97 event, we're looking pretty good. We colored in the whole boundary there just so that people wouldn't ask, hey, am I in the floodplain or did I flood? These were the extent. So let's just go through here and see what kinds of floods we have. Wow, look at that. Early 1862. That was what we called the arc storm. If any of you heard of that, you might remember your emergency management staff trying to develop a scenario of an arc storm event and how we would handle it in this community. And then since 1907, we've had a number of events. The peak flow in 07, and that's a fairly famous photograph of the Virginia Street Bridge that you see from time to time. 18,000 CFS, and this is measured at around 395 on the Truckee River, just a little upstream, so in Reno, probably about a half a mile upstream of the 395 bridge. Close to a 90-year event. January 16th, 1909, 10,000. That was only a 30-year event. All the way down to where? 1997. That's the baby. That's the one that really got us going. And then, of course, the 1986 event. I will point out some facts that are just merely facts. The 86 and 97 events were probably our two largest floods of record. They both occurred fairly early in the flood season, although the February one was mid-February, so we're at the beginning of February right now. The reason why the numbers 14,400 don't look like they're that large is because the flood event actually occurred in North Sparks, came down, flooded Sparks horribly, and then flooded the Meadows area, filled that up. But we didn't get as much water from the Truckee River from Steamboat Creek that time. But when the discharge into Vista down to the lower canyon, it was a lot higher, and it was definitely a 100-year event, although it showed to be only 50. This illustrates a point, and it's important for you all to understand this point. You can have a 117-year event in Washoe County, but that does not mean that everybody experiences a 117-year event. It'd be very reasonable to assume that some people experience a 25-year event and some maybe experience a higher event. So this is not, please do not ever take the notion that just because we have a 100-year event doesn't mean that everybody experiences that. Let's look at the activity that has occurred because of all this flooding. In 1954, the Federal Flood Control Act of 1954 was passed, and we got an authorized project. That authorized project is the one that built or that dredged out the Vista Reefs. In 1988, we got a WRDA, which is a Water Resources Development Act authorization for a much smaller project. Well, it was smaller dollar-wise, but it still protected the elements that we are now today trying to protect. And in 2014, another Water Resources Reform and Development Act, we got another authorized project, a 50-year project as defined by the Corps of Engineers. 3 federal projects. They built one, they canceled the 88 one, and in 2014, they're waiting for us to act. They want to make sure that this community will partner with them and build the project. Do we expect a flood this year? I am not a prognosticator, I am an engineer. I can look at data, and I did. I looked at data. I plotted all these major flood events against the El Nino index. And I found a couple of interesting things. I found that none of our storms, the big storms, have occurred during an El Nino. Zip, zilch, nada. They haven't even occurred in a weak El Nino. They've all been in what they call the Enzo neutral zone or the weak La Nina event. We are in a strong El Nino right now. Do I expect a storm? In 100 years, we haven't got one. So do we expect a storm in the next plus or minus 4 years? I would say most definitely yes. So no for this year. Why? Majority of the flood season is over. 4 of our 13 storms, I think I counted that right, and I wrote it down. 4 of 13 storms have occurred beyond today's date in time. Every other storm occurred either in December or in January. So we get a lot of winter storms. There has never been a flood during an El Nino. So do we expect a major flood soon? Well, now it starts getting interesting because we've experienced a heavy El Nino. And I would say yes. Why? Because if you look at the plot, and I have the plot. If you want to see it, you can ask for it, but I didn't print it out because it became, I think, a technical nightmare, and so I didn't, but I have it. We're on the downhill side of a strong El Nino, and we're moving into a La Nina. So I would say yes, plus or minus 15 years since we've had a major event. 2005 was our last one. And floods tend to end droughts in the Sierra. And then again, we're now heading into that La Nina zone where it would make sense from at least from a data standpoint. And again, there's a difference between a hydrologist, which I call myself, and a meteorologist, which is a prognosticator of weather. Okay, what is our regional strategy? I am making a few key points in this presentation, and I'm going to leave it for questions for the elected officials. Here's something that we've never said before in public. We have a FEMA problem. Our FEMA maps are inaccurate. In almost every case, with exception of a small area, the FEMA maps show a building elevation of a foot to almost 2 feet too low. That means somebody that's building according to the regulations that your communities are upholding during the building code, an individual would build a building too low. And why do I say, is there a FEMA problem? Well, if you go back to those storms, I'm going to do that. I'm going to go back to those storms. Come on, let's go back. Those last 3 storms were not part of the analysis done when we calculated the hydrology for our river. So that means we missed out of our hydrology, we missed out the 2 largest storms of 2 largest events that this region has experienced. Now, when you include those in the hydrology, you end up with 2,000 more CFS peak flow, and you get a larger, higher water surface elevation. So we'll go back through this, and the reason why I did that is I wanted you to see. So I think we can leave that at that point. I have notified your senior staff that I was going to say this today. This could basically generate a lot of questions amongst you, amongst them, and amongst the public. But now we know that we've got a problem, and the reason why we have never discussed this is because the flood project was always a given. We were going to build the flood project. And therefore, we just never talked about it.
Mr. Aldean.
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Hartone would like a question.
Sure.
It's germane to what we're talking about. How did FEMA arrive at the elevations? And maybe that'll give us a reason as to why they are so wrong. Thank you.
I will tell you. Back in the late 70s, early 80s, when the model was done, the hydraulic model, we have to do this by hydraulic modeling. We can't go out and just kind of take our thumb and say, I think it gets to be about that high. We had what they call a one-dimensional model that was very, very poor at calculating the water surface elevation. So number one, I don't blame FEMA. Number two, I don't blame the communities. The communities had no better information to deal with, and hence when the buildings got built, they did not know that they were allowing this circumstance. Plus, we've had a change in weather. So when you couple all those things together, you end up getting a floodplain that's just a lot higher than what we thought it was going to be. And let me tell you, it's easy to calculate a floodplain in a river if it's just a river and there's one bank and there's 2 banks. But when you've got a big, huge detention facility, and that's what we have, call it a flood pool, call it the critical flood zone, whatever you want to call it, it's a big detention basin. And when you have one of those, it's very difficult to try to estimate what the water surfaces are. So there is no fault to be found here for the reason why we've built where we built. And the flood project was instigated because the engineers recognized that this was going to be an issue, and after convincing the elected authorities over the last 30 years, they realized we really needed to do something. So since the early 80s, our technology and computing ability has changed drastically.
And
So-
with, it looks like we're starting to take questions, and I see that you have about 3 more slides to finish, but Councilman
Well, I've
Dewar.
got about 5,
Okay.
6 more slides to finish.
Councilwoman Dewar.
Just a quick question on this. So when is FEMA planning to remap our floodplain?
FEMA remaps when they, 1, get money, 2, get a community request. And right now, they don't have any money. Or probably 3, when they become aware of an acute problem.
Okay.
They are not aware of the acute problem. We have not asked for a remap, and they don't have any money.
Okay, but just to follow up, they did remap the area where the Southeast Connector's going to,
That's
for the
correct.
Clomar? But just that kind of band?
That remapping was done according to existing flow rates.
Okay.
So, and that was really a reasonable call in my estimation. When I did the check for the Southeast Connector, I checked it with the newer flow rates to make sure that, again, best available information, there wasn't going to be a problem.
Right, but.
But
so-
the
there's no
remapping that
plan
occurred,
now.
yes,
Okay, thank
is
you.
based on the lower flow rates.
Okay, thank you.
And I don't mind questions during this presentation. I think I'd rather hear what's on your mind right to begin with, and I can direct my comments to you. So what is the other critical importance of the region? Provide safety to the public. These are all gimmies. You all know the answers to this. It reduces property damage and disruptions. It strengthens the economy of the region. We spoke in the last 2 months. Mimi Fuji Strickler and I have been meeting with the commercial people that basically live in the Sparks industrial area and the Reno industrial area. And we have found that they would love to invest, but they're not going to until they can actually get permits because they're in the floodplain. That area is becoming old. And their comments to us was, we know that there's problems here. We get reduced rents because no one's going to charge us higher rents. But there are things that we can't get here that we would like to get. We would like this area to renovate and rejuvenate. And that's not going to happen while that area is in the floodplain.
Councilwoman Jordan.
Thank you very much. Let me point out that this is where all the cool kids are. Or the late ones. I have a question. So if FEMA doesn't have any money, but we collectively ask for a remapping, where does it go?
If you get a request, then FEMA prioritizes that request, and sometimes, mind you, will find money to do a remap. As I say, well, it's better than if you don't request it and they don't have any money, then you'll never see a remap. But if you request it, then they will look for money. What they'll do is they'll research what's been done. They would probably contact our agency and ask us for what information we have. And we have that kind of relationship with them as well. Although we don't administrate the floodplain like I see Carrie Lanza is here. She basically handles a lot of the floodplain administration. John Flansburgh is your floodplain administrator. Neil Kreutz is for the City of Sparks, and I think I saw Dwayne Smith, Washoe County is here. These are all individuals that are staff members that basically administrate the floodplain. I don't. I'm just trying to build a project. All right. So, enough said. Now for another point that you have that you need to be told as elected officials. The Army Corps of Engineers is critical to our strategy. Now, I know you've heard me speak, at least from time to time, that we're not going to get any federal money. Well, I will caveat that. We're not going to get any federal money to actually go out and build the project immediately. I wouldn't expect to see federal money for 5 to 10 years, but I would eventually expect to see some. The thing that I want to basically tell you is that you will most likely never get another federal project authorization other than the one you have. So if we don't do anything about this now, we will lose the federal government as our partner. Be very clear about that. It is critical that we do something about it in the next 3 to 4 years. Now, I would prefer to do something about it in the next 2 to 3 years. But because our board disapproved the fees that we calculated, we now no longer have a guaranteed revenue stream, and the Corps of Engineers is watching that. And they're also talking to us on a regular basis. What are you going to do? Well, we'll tell you what we're going to do. And I've got that presentation to give to them. But they're watching. And if we don't do anything, even though the benefit cost ratio of the project that we have engineered ourselves is 2.4, we just now got a new flood to deal with that the federal government has to prioritize over us. Katrina, Sandy, the Missouri River flooding, all those projects have a benefit cost ratio better than the 2.4 that we have. Now, our 2.4 is better than the 1.2 that the Corps of Engineers calculated for their 50-year plan, but that's immaterial at this point in time. Our project, the 2.4 100-year project, will be the one that will compete on a national level. So you say, well, will we ever get any money? Yeah, eventually we'll get money, because eventually the Corps will get money and they will reimburse us. But they will more than likely never study again.
Councilwoman.
Okay, just a quick question. So the Corps of Engineers approved the 100-year project or a 50-year project?
They
or-
approved a 50-year plan that was their own plan, their own study.
And it only showed 1.2?
1.2 benefit
To one?
cost ratio.
So I wanted to follow up on this question, this comment you made that we only had 3 to 4 years. Does this expire, this approval? Or do we have to begin construction within a certain time of
What happens-
receiving the authorization, or what?
That is a very good question, and this is a question that we've been asked a number of times by the commercial interests, by the AGC, by the chamber. What happens in Washington is a project will stay active for a while. And the Corps of Engineers basically dumped about 200 projects, 300 projects in the last couple of years. They were authorized projects just like ours is authorized. Theirs weren't authorized in 2014. They were authorized in earlier federal legislation, but they just dumped them. They just said, these are no longer going to be we're not even going to deal with them. They will never get any money. And so they basically shelved them. I don't know what you want to call that.
What is their rationale? I mean,
The rationale is that the BC ratios were low. They were projects that didn't have a lot of political support. They had been authorized in some cases up to 20 years. You know, they'd been authorized for a long time, and there was not enough political support to generate any revenue. So they just said, no one's going to push us on it. We're not going to build them. And remember, Congress makes the law, and they authorize the project, but then the Corps of Engineers on the executive branch is the one that gets the money. They get to decide who gets the money. Without earmarks, and when federal earmarks is a very important thing to our project, is if we could get an earmark, we'd be in good shape, because Reed could have gotten us that easily. We would have had it in 2014. Actually, we would have had it this year. The budget in 2015 is when we would have had it. But that's not going to happen because earmarks are now off the table. So the point is you give the money to the Corps of Engineers, they get a chance to decide which projects get their money. They've got about 700 or 800 projects. I know it's well above 500 projects that are active. And they have to decide who gets the $2 or $3 billion that they get. But I'll guarantee you, with the East Coast, Hurricane Sandy, the big snowstorm that just happened last week, that was a lot of flooding there. In some cases, more flooding than Hurricane Sandy. And then the Missouri River flooding of about 5 years ago that basically covered half of Nebraska,
But
and the other
3 to
half of Missouri.
The 3 to 4 years, though, so it's not like a trigger, or there's no end date, or it's just that it starts aging, is that what you're saying, and we become less relevant or something?
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. After a while, the Corps says, and here's the key, the Corps looks for the ability of the community to pay its debt. And the Corps looks at our debt as our funding for the federal project. Now, they don't look beyond any more than maybe $5 or $10 million a year. So if we were to match our money, we may be able to match it with our existing 1/8 cent sales tax that we currently take in. But after, how long it takes, well, how long does it take to build a $400 million project at $10 million a year? So the notion is we have to show them that we're willing to do that. If it gets into that category where it becomes a project that they don't want to look at, then they'll shelve it. And we won't get any more federal or congressional authorization because we have one now. So we won't get any further study on that. It is what it is. We now plan for no federal dollars to be conservative so that we can build our project in a time frame that we want to build. So 5 years, 10 years, if we can build our project in a 10-year window, I doubt we'll get really any appreciable amount of federal dollars. So we basically have to fund the project ourselves and then, however, ask for some reimbursement. If we fund our project and we debt finance it, then any reimbursement could go to retire the debt. So it's not a lost cause. There is one other area where the federal government is important to us, and I'll point that out in a minute. Events and accomplishments. It has been said that the flood project hasn't accomplished much. In 2011, the Corps of Engineers told me and my chair and Councilman Dave Ayazi and Councilwoman Jessica Sraza in Washington that our project was a dog and that it would never go forward. That was 2011. We united with Senator Reed and strategized how we could bring the Corps back to the table, and through Senator Reed's influence and our constant barraging of the Corps, we were able to get the Corps to come back to the table. Although it was kind of funny because the general of the General Walsh, the general of the acting general at the time, said to General Weir, who was the division of South Pacific in San Francisco, is the lead commanding officer for all of the southwest part of the United States. He looked at General Weir and he said, "This project needs a recommendation, and you're not going to make that recommendation, are you?" And when you're sitting with a bunch of generals, that you kind of get on edge, if you know what I mean. Nevertheless, we proposed a strategy, a dual-pronged strategy. Okay, fine, if this Corps wants to study a 50-year plan, let's support them. And let's do a couple of things. So if we support them, let's engineer our own plan. The board bought off on that strategy, and we did that. In 2013, we actually developed a conceptual preliminary plan for $445 million, of which we need to fund $412 million, and the board approved it. And in part of that approval included an extra add-on portion for downtown Reno, and that was included in the $445 million price tag. In 2014, we worked on Congress. And Congress included the Corps' plan, the 50-year plan, in the WRDA bill, and it got authorized. It was pretty amazing, the fact that happened. I mean, it is pretty darn amazing. Oscar, Councilman Delgado was with me at the Civil Works Review Board when we were back in Washington, and heard firsthand what the generals had to say about our plan. They liked our plan. 2015, we turned our financial consultants loose, along with our hydraulic engineers loose, to try to figure out who's flooding, so that we could basically tier the flood fees between direct benefit and regional benefit, and also get them to revamp their model, because the last thing that they heard from us was 2009. And we got that done. We presented those numbers to the board, and the board said, that's just too expensive. We'll drive the businesses away surely if we basically approve this plan. So they looked at staff and they said, what are our options? Well, there are a few options to actually to consider. There really is only one option that really remains on the table to build the 100-year plan that we want to build. Any other option will be a much lesser project and will have certainly very few benefits. So what we have been doing as staff is, as directed by our board, we've been meeting with the commercial interest, because we thought, and our board, although they didn't vote on this, comments have been they're not going to consider another financing mechanism if at least the people that are benefiting directly from this flood project don't pay a significant amount. They want to put skin in the game from these commercial interests. And that includes the airport. And that means that the prices of airline flights into Reno will jack up a little bit. And it means that commercial interests will have to pay. But what we did is we met with those individuals to try to find out their willingness to do that. Almost all of them are willing to do it. Nobody likes the idea, but they're willing to do it because they know that one of the individuals said, I'm not going through a flood again. And I know that we definitely will flood. And we will be proposing the alternative that I kind of flesh out for you today to our board in their February meeting, which is coming up on the 12th of this month. I think that this hand likes the... So what have we done also? Well, we've helped the city of Reno by providing $7.5 million in construction fees, and a total of $12 million, actually $12.25 million for the design and for the replacement of the Virginia Street Bridge. It is a crucial component to downtown. Now, people have asked me, I got a question from NPR, and they said, well, fine, now you got the downtown fixed. I said, oh no, the downtown is not fixed. That only helps the local area, but it requires Sierra Bridge, it requires Lake Street, it requires Center Street to all be replaced. It also requires the elements of all along Riverside Drive to be upgraded so that the water doesn't flood down First Street. And it also requires the replacement or the removal of Booth Street Bridge and replacing it with a pedestrian structure. That then would take care of downtown. We also helped finance the North Truckee Drain. The City of Sparks, and I commend both the City of Sparks and the City of Reno for doing these very, very important projects. But you heard my comment on the City of Reno's Virginia Street Bridge. Will it now protect all of downtown? The answer is a resounding no. Will the North Truckee Drain protect the Sparks industrial area? The same answer. Until we build the levees that keep the water away from flooding that, it's still going to flood. Now, it will help, just as the Virginia Street Bridge will help, but it will not protect. And I want to make sure I don't mince words as I say this. So what was the rate? You might all want to know, and you are welcome to find out what the rate model was. We basically designed our rate for two-tiered charges. Now, we have the authority, the flood board has the authority to enact these rates. We don't need to we borrowed the authority from you as community entities, so Reno, Sparks, Washoe County, when we formed our flood agency. We have the authority to basically impose a rate. We cannot impose a tax like the flood control district of Clark County can. So we had two rates. The direct benefit area was area number 2, and that's the area where you see in the violet color, dark purple, I guess, there at the South Sparks, East Reno area, the airport. Those individuals will pay a higher fee. And then the rest of the county would pay a lesser fee, but it would basically augment the total fee so that we could build the project. What are the scenarios that we looked at when we designed our rates? We looked at two construction scenarios, an 18-year and a 10-year scenario. 10-year was considered humanly possible, the earliest we could build a project of this magnitude and complete it, and then go into FEMA remapping. 18 years was probably a more relaxed approach, 18 to 20 years in my mind, but we did it on an 18-year basis on how much money we thought we could actually ask from the community to pay. Now, the board likes the concept of a 10-year. They did not vote on this, but in just private conversations, I think that the board really likes the 10-year notion. What are the construction funding scenarios? Well, we had to do a pay-as-you-go. We had to look at it. If we just took money and then we built, and then we took more money and then built, and after a 10-year period, the pay-as-you-go scenario was hugely expensive. I do have a calculation since then on what that is. We could also debt finance it. And we looked at both the State Bond Bank and TRFMA revenue bonds. We don't have a response from the board on this, although I would imagine that if I was thinking that they would probably go with the least expensive option in order to be able to fit this project in with other demands and needs of the community. What are the building scenarios we looked at? Well, if we were to build it, Tumwa pays close to $2 million, I believe. Is that what? No, $1.5 million or something like that. We would be paying about $2 million annually to have a contract to collect revenue. We knew that was an expensive thing. We also looked into using the county treasurer. The county treasurer does not like that idea. I will be very frank and earnest with you that we would have a battle in order to be able to get that. However, the cost of that annually is probably in the $500,000 range. So as you can see, it saves the community $1.5 million a year, and that would have to be taken into account. If I were to recommend it, I would recommend that we basically pursue that option. And this is how I presented it to the board. Now, for the emergency reserve, the federal government again. Actually, I should have switched the way that these came in. Let's pull this one in. According to our interlocal agreement, we calculated about $43 million sitting in a bank every year, year after year, doing nothing. We can maybe acquire some interest on it and use that to retire debt, but that's about all we could do with it. What would we use that for? Is it possible to break our flood project? The answer is yes. If we get a storm like, the 97 event wouldn't have basically damaged our flood project. We could have withstood that. But if we'd have got some of the floods like they got the Hurricane Sandy, Hurricane Katrina, and although we're not subject to hurricanes, there are the Ark storm event, the 1860 storm. If that would have come, it rained constantly for 28 days. 28 days it rained here. That would break our flood project. It would cause levees to rupture, and the $43 million is to have it available to come back in and immediately fix it. Because if we're charging individuals for a flood project and it breaks, then we are obligated to put it back in order ASAP. If we sign a contract or a partnership agreement contract with the federal government, they step in and build it for free. That's an important distinction. Maybe we keep $15 million, and that's on the high side, maybe $10 million, $5 million in the bank as a reserve so that we can get equipment out there and start working on it, but the federal government would come in immediately and fix the project. They are obligated to do that, and they're very good about that particular obligation. Again, the notion is I prefer the $15 million reserve. It saves the fee cost significantly. Now,
A question on this, if you don't mind.
No, please.
Mr. Chair. I'm a little bit confused, I have to admit, about the emergency reserve. So are you saying that if we bond, there's a requirement that we set aside so much in a reserve account, and the question is how big or small should that reserve account be?
Well, it's not because of the bond, although the bond would more than likely require some minimal reserve. It wouldn't be $43 million. The $43 million is to be able to have money ready in case we lost a levee.
Oh, okay, emergency replacement.
Emergency
type.
repair.
But this is once the levee's built. I mean, this
Yes.
is
Yes.
not during the construction.
Well, no, not during the
I
construction.
mean, this
but
is an
it's-
after.
But it was money that
filling
we
up
would
the-
have to collect from the citizens and put it into a bank and
Okay.
put it into an account.
So, but, I mean, first you'd build the project, then you'd start funding the reserve, or are you saying you'd start funding it as you built? Is that the idea?
That is a good question. My intent was always to fund it after. But to have minimal amounts of money still on reserve in order to be able to repair things, especially as the project is
But
getting completed.
bottom line, you're saying this decision on this reserve dramatically impacts the amount of money that we need to collect.
Yes, and it's a requirement, and it's important to point out that if we change this from 43 to 15, it will require a revision of our interlocal agreement. So we have to go back to all three communities and ask for a revision. However, if we're with the federal government, we now have the backing of the federal government, and I would think that most any board and commission would allow that to happen.
And through this all, I'm a little, would like some clarity on what project are we trying to build? Is it the 50, the 100, and what's the total cost? That you're giving us a lot of detailed analysis on how to pay for it, but I'm not really sure.
I'm blasting you with a lot of information.
what are
I
we
hate to
trying-
tell you, but that's just what I have to do.
Just what project, 100-year, 50-year,
We're
and
trying
how
to
much
build,
money?
our project has always been united by our consensus vote from our board to build a 100-year plan.
And we're saying we would do this all our own, is what
We
you're
would do
saying.
this all our
Okay.
own.
And it would cost 400.
445 million total. We probably have to finance about 412. The last number I think I gave to the board was $412 million. That's because we've bought a lot of property that we own. We've got portions, we got a piece of the, like the Walmart over there on Glendale, that's part of the flood project. That portion is built, and so those portions are built. And we considered the Reno Bridge, the Virginia Street Bridge, as part of the built section. So that's why we're not asking for 445. We're asking for 412.
Got it. And then this 43 is just like 10% of the total cost
Yeah.
to set aside as an emergency.
Yeah,
Okay, thank you.
and that is, like I said, that is a stipulation in the interlocal agreement. So,
Mr. Aldean,
sure.
can I ask you one quick question? And I know Mrs. Davis is here in the audience with us today. You know, I would like to hear, I know you said that the treasurer had reservations in regards to collecting the fees for the project. Can I hear from her reservations
Oh,
and
please,
and the
Tammy.
reasons why?
Good morning. For the record, Tammy Davis, Washoe County Treasurer. First, let me say, when we've had these discussions, I had not seen the fee schedule. So that was part of my reservation, as I wasn't sure what the impact would be. At a very high level, without having analyzed these at all, one of my concerns is for commercial properties, if these fees are high enough that I'm asked to add an amount to a tax bill that might, if I had to take a property to sale for delinquent taxes, might exceed what the value of the property is. That would be a concern to me. That would leave us with unpaid taxes, unpaid flood fees. Now, I've expressed that I'm very open to being part of the process. I just want to make sure if this decision is made, and I recognize it's not my decision, everyone is fully informed of what the impacts could be. And also, when we were having these discussions, it was during the recession when there were a lot of delinquent property taxes. I was having to sell a lot of property. So I just wanted to make sure those decisions are made with full information. I'm not necessarily against it. I fully understand this is an important project. I understand that the tax bill is a very effective and cost-effective collection mechanism. I just want to be sure that that decision is not taken lightly, because it can affect the ability of a property owner to retain their property if they are not able to pay those. So those are my concerns, and I'm not against it. I just want to make sure the proper conversations take place before that is decided.
So it seems like the risk is not only shared by the owners of the property, but also the county and the cities as well. And if the property does go delinquent and we can't sell the property to cover the taxes, that would fall back onto the county as well, correct?
Correct.
I mean,
And again, I didn't
uncollected
know what the
taxes.
rates were, so I was kind of looking at worst-case scenarios. I don't know if that plays out in these rates. So I just think it's an important conversation. It's not something I'm, just blanket against. I just think there's an important conversation that needs to take place with the numbers in place.
Thank you, Mrs. Davis.
And I again, like I said, I wanted to make sure that I was truthful in Ms. Davis's comments to me. But moving on to, let's just take as an example one of these rates. These are the scenarios that we gave to the board in October. And the way you read this is the upper one, the whole upper 5 rows was if we build it ourselves, or we build, B-I-L-L-E-D, the rate ourselves. The lower is if the county treasurer issued the bill for our tax bill. And again, just as an example, if you look at the first line, it's now highlighted in yellow. The annual requirement is about $23 million that we need in order to be able to build this project. And this is with a scenario 1, which was with 18-year construction period, and we need that much money. The 2 rates, remember the area, or the 2 areas. Area 1 was the general county, Area 2 is the direct benefit. So single-family dwelling units that are residential, that are outside of the direct benefit area would pay $8.93 per household per month. Single-family dwelling units, and there's not many in the actual direct benefit area, would pay basically $26 a month. Now, that's per each. Now, when you look at commercial, the way the commercial was done was based upon developed square footage or structural square footage, which is found in the assessor's database. So we have a ready-made billing mechanism there if we need it. So if you take KSF, as it stands for 1,000 square feet of commercial or industrial, if you're in Area 1, you'd pay $1.86 per 1,000 square feet. Not a very high number. But for the Area 2, and remember this is the 18-year scenario, this is the cheapest, or one of the cheapest of the scenarios that we looked at, it would be $11 per 1,000 square feet, or basically 1.1 cents per square foot per month that the commercial interest would have to pay. Again, because the board really didn't care for the 18-year scenario, if we were to look at a 10-year scenario, that would be 2B.
Ms. Chaldine?
Yes.
Councilwoman Bybee, have a question?
Sure.
I just had a question on the single-family dwelling. Are there any assessments for multifamily?
Multifamily, we had actually had a couple of considerations by Councilwoman Dewar and Councilwoman Breckus as to how we would charge those, and we have not looked into that any further than multifamily would be charged as a developed square footage.
So would that fall under commercial?
Fall under commercial. That's the way we did it. It could easily be undone and changed, but it's not going to make that big of a difference. You're not going to see those numbers change, certainly on the cent side, and that's about it.
Okay, thank you.
And because the board rejected the fee notion, there's no reason to go back and look at that any further. We'll just leave it at commercial and go that way in the future. At any rate, if you look at the 10-year scenario, they're all more expensive. Scenario 2B, it shows $20 per square foot, or 2 cents per square foot per month. The 3B is 1.7 cents per square foot per month. They were all way, way too high, and the commercial interest that we talked to basically confirmed that. If it goes over a penny, he says, we're gone. So, with that said, we also did the pay-as-you-go scenario for a 10-year period. That was really high. That was 3 cents per square foot per month, $30 per 1,000 square feet. And again, those fees were, to put it mildly, all the air got sucked out of the room when we mentioned those numbers, and people were just about ready to keel over because they said, there's no way we could survive this. And we understand that. Again, we had this little calculation done just so that we could answer questions should any of you have those. So what funding, go ahead.
So just putting this in perspective, because I remember that we had calculated, the flood project had calculated these numbers, whether the project was 117 year and, plus $1 billion, or this 50 year or this 100 year, we always came up with the fact that we had to generate $400 million. We, regardless of the other scenarios, we had to generate $400 million. And I recall these numbers being much lower, for these areas that you're calling Area 1. Like $1.30 per home a month, not $8, not $6, $9, $1.30. So, I mean, to make the $400, you have your 1/8 cent sales tax, which is bringing in, as you said, $10 million.
That's correct.
That can support so much bonding. Mm-hmm. And so I guess I'm struggling a bit to know why these
numbers seem
still
so
the
high.
same amount of money we have to come up with $400 million.
I may have a degree in finance, at least an MBA, but Mr. Sherman was the one that basically helped us with this, and the FCS folks, we met on numerous occasions and gave them. I have, as a backups to these slides, at the end of the presentation, I have all the assumptions that we made.
Okay.
If you need those, or if, by request, we'll include those in the final information packet, and you can have those.
Well, I mean, I understand inflation, time, cost of money, all those things. $1.30 might be $2.50, but not necessarily, 8, 9.
Todd Chase did these.
Okay.
All
right. Well, I'll look into it. I appreciate it. I just, I was struggling with it. So.
Absolutely. So, funding alternative. We have not vetted this with our board. They're probably aware of it by basically conversations that we have had at various and sundry times with individuals, but they have never voted on this. And I don't have a final number to give you. And I learn to regret every time I give a number, especially in public, because it gets somehow, basically becomes concrete for some strange reason. I will give you a number just as a gut feeling, just so that you have an idea of, as leaders, what you can do for the community. It's a hybrid funding concept. It's a funding concept that says we will impose a fee on the direct benefit area, much like you would do on, let's say, a special assessment district. Although we have the authority as a board to pass that fee, and it will be my recommendation that we do that. Special assessment district is another option out there that we could use for financing. But at the end of the day, they would have to raise a certain amount of money, and they would have to have the skin in the game, as I mentioned earlier. And the other option is a sales tax. Now, I don't want to be sensational or theatrical, but every flood control district in this country is financed by sales tax. Clark County, SAFCA, which is Sacramento Area Flood Control District, the Bay Area, Fresno, Southern California, they're all financed with sales taxes. That's the normal and appropriate way for funding a project such as this. It captures the fact that you have regional users contributing to a benefit that they're receiving by paying sales tax and building a project that now they can drive on our roads when it floods. So those are the two concepts. Those gaining the most pay the most. I think that's a very fair way to look at it. Legal arguments support direct pay fee. It's a difficult argument to make from a legal standpoint, and our attorney is here, and he'll probably slap me for this, but it's difficult to have a general fee over the whole county. That argument is difficult to make. Sales tax recognizes regional benefits to the project, which there are regional benefits. Captures the regional nature of a flood project by passing portion of funding to regional users. Most of the flood improvements, as I said, most flood improvement districts are funded by sales tax. And I'm going to leave it at that, with the exception that I leave you with a challenge. We're trying to help you. We know, I got an interesting comment from one of your managers when I had breakfast with them, and I said, if we don't build the flood project, and this individual said, who then has to deal with it? Us? Yeah, you will. You will have to deal with it. We're trying to help you, and if we can, we'd like to build the project, but we know it costs a lot of money. And we also recognize the 1,000-pound gorilla in the room. We know the community has needs other than ours. But we are from the government, and we are here to help. So with that, I will leave it open to questions. If you want to see the El Nino plot, or if you want to see those extra slides, I do have them. And there you have it.
Thank you, Mr. Aldine. Look to my right in City Council. Any comments? My left? No. Mayor Martini.
Only one comment.
Oh, yes, Councilwoman Dura.
You know, I think it might help. I know over the years, you guys have produced these different, this is a very old one, these Living River map books that show exactly what would be built. I assume you have one for this current plan you're trying to build.
We have a new one. It's on our website and actually downloadable, but it's a lot smaller, so it can easily be downloaded by an individual off of our website and printed out.
But would you be
I
willing
can
to
give
make some
copies to all the elected officials.
Just so we know what's in front of us, what would be built in this project?
Certainly.
That would be helpful.
Certainly, we will get that out.
Thank you.
Okay, Mayor Martini.
Questions from Sparks? Okay, we're good.
Commissioner Lucy.
Any commissioners? Seeing none. We're good.
No further comments for, I'm looking at the dais for Mr. Aldine. Secretary, do we have any public comments?
We have none at this time, Mr. Vice Mayor.
Okay. General comments? No, I think just next steps in terms of, I know today was a presentation, and if you can just really quick summarize as to what the board is going to be dealt with for this year in terms of the overall flood project, that'd be great.
I had meant to do that. I'm sorry, I failed to do that. I was up here a lot longer, but everybody that knows me knows that I can't do it in any shorter time. Next steps would be, we would put before our board the concept of a sales tax alternative and a direct benefit fee. We would then actively work as staff on the direct benefit fee to revise it to reflect the numbers that, actually, I didn't even give you the numbers. So we talked about $8 per 1,000 square feet, so it's 0.8 cents per month. And most of the commercial entities that we spoke with agreed to that. Some begged for it. Some said it's going to hurt us, but we'll do it. One guy said he would sell his 401k so that he could pay it off in 1 year period. We need to fix that. We need to work on that. It'll take us several months to do that. As the director of the flood project, I have always been in favor of, if there was a sales tax, that it be an item voted on by the voters of Washoe County. I trust the voters of Washoe County to do what's in their best interest, and therefore we would be asking the board for a question. Our board would then, we would then take the question to Washoe County Commission and ask for the commission to place it on the November ballot. And then we would actively work with, PR campaigns and those that have interest that want this thing to pass. And we would help provide information as necessary. And I can imagine I would go on a speaking tour, but, and that's perfectly okay. And wait and see what the voters of Washoe County want to do.
Okay.
The sales tax that I'm asking for would probably be about 1/4 cent, maybe a little higher.
Okay. Commissioner Brickbiggler.
Thank you. I'm curious, the fee would not have to go on the ballot. That would not be voted on by the citizens in the area?
That is correct. And let me also include the way that we presented it to the commercial interests, where our board would pass the fee sometime this year. And the reason why they would pass it sometime this year is because it would be an enacted fee so that the voters know that the commercial interests are going to pay their fair share. But we would make the collection of that fee stipulated linked it to an actual vote by the state legislature of passing the sales tax. So if we get a sales tax advisory question and it's yes, and then we go to the state and we ask for the sales tax and the state votes yes, then the fee we'd start to collect it then.
So the,
Yes, please.
so the, under the hybrid funding concept, the fee would only apply to commercial, it would not apply to any residential?
That's correct. The fee, well, if the residential is in the direct benefit area, then we would have to come up with an amount to apply to residential as well. There's a small number of homes, probably less than 100, that are actually in the floodplain, in the direct benefit area. Some are in Reno, some are in Washoe County. East Side subdivision, that one, everybody there. And you would come out of the fee if you built your house high enough. So there are new construction that has gone on in, let's say, East Side subdivision, which is a county subdivision. If the house was built up high enough, then they don't have to pay the fee. The fee was to basically show the voters that the commercial interests that are gaining the most pay the most.
Commissioner Hartung.
Thank you. So, Mr. Aldean, the question that would go on the ballot is for a 1/4 cent sales tax, or a total of a 1/4 cent would be an additional eighth?
It would be
Could you
an
articulate
additional, and remember I said I didn't want to give you a number, 1/4 cent, but it'll be an additional 1/4 cent. The 1/4 cent I spoke about is in addition to the 1/8 cent that we collect now.
Okay.
And it would be obviously in addition to a fee that is collected.
I just wanted to make sure that was on the record clearly. Thank
You bet.
Mr. Aldean, one other question. If we were to do the direct pay fee, as you were saying, if the FEMA maps were redrawn and the flood zone was enlarged, that direct pay would possibly affect further residential houses within Washoe County and Reno?
Let me explain it this way. If we didn't build the flood project and it were remapped, then we'd probably put 400 or 500, I'm assuming, homes into the floodplain. Most would be in Reno, a few would be in Washoe County. And I don't know in Sparks, I don't think there really are any in Sparks. I think the lion's share would be Reno. They would then go into the floodplain and have to pay flood insurance. Flood insurance on a single-family home is anywhere between $2,000 to $3,000 per year. And if they're out of the flood zone and they get that same flood insurance, their number goes from $2,000 to $3,000 down to $200 to $300. So it's a significant drop. Commercial interest, commercial real estate, and how flood insurance is done is a little bit differently. All the commercial areas in Sparks, in the southern Sparks area, between I-80 and the river, they're all in the floodplain.
Thank you.
And they would all come out if we built our flood project.
Councilwoman Reddy.
That just triggered a question that I have on the request to FEMA for remapping. Where does that fit into this new strategy?
If we build a project, it will be our pleasure to basically supply FEMA with all the information they need to remap it. In other words, all the hydraulics that we've been running would all qualify, and we would just package it up and send it to the government, and the federal government would just take it and modify the maps. It would be one fell swoop very quickly. But it would be done because we had a change to the floodplain. See, when you have a change to the floodplain, the person that changes, or the agency that changes the floodplain, is obligated to supply new FEMA mapping information.
Right. So assuming that we're able to sail through the next steps that you've just outlined, which is implementing a fee at the board level, an advisory question at the county commission level, and approval of that question at the state, then that would just happen.
We would just, it would
It would
be
happen
one
as
of,
part
it
of
would be
building
one
the
of our
project.
jobs. It would be the agency's job to do it, and we would just do it. We would work, obviously, with Reno Sparks and Washoe County staff, but because we're the holders of all that information, we would just package it up, let them review it, and then we would submit it to FEMA, and it would be done.
So if we aren't successful checking off all those boxes,
Then I
it's your
get to retire.
recommendation, many of us, it's your recommendation then that we would tell FEMA that we have this issue and request
I
mapping?
wouldn't make that recommendation because it would be up to your respective communities to make that recommendation and decide how they want to handle it. That is a strategy that it's not mine. And therefore, you would,
But it has to happen at each community level?
yes. Sparks, are you currently in the NFIP? Not, you are now. At the time, for a while, they weren't, and I hadn't asked this question for a while. But all communities, when you're in the NFIP, are obligated to FEMA directly. So you have a floodplain administrator in Sparks. I guess that's Neil, or is it Mr. Martini? John Martini is your floodplain administrator. And Washoe County's got one, Reno's got one. Reno, it's John Flansburgh. And Dwayne, are you here? I think, is it you? Kimball Corbridge, Washoe County. And they work under the Public Works umbrella. And again,
Councilwoman Dewar.
So Jay, just to recap, so regardless of whether we remap with FEMA or not, you said if we remapped, it would bring 400 to 600 more homes into the floodplain, but they're already there. I mean, they are where they are. This is just saying the reality that you are where you are.
you picked up on something very important, yes.
Okay, I mean, it doesn't change. They're still in the floodplain. They're still going to flood.
Right, but what would change is that they would have to pay their
They
flood
would have to
insurance.
pay. And the alternative is when and if they flood, they're going to have to pay. They have home insurance, presumably. There's deductibles. If it was a big enough flood, the federal government would get involved like they did in '97 and you know, help bail us out. So I guess my second question related to this is you said, if all these things that Councilwoman Ratty said come true, you would package up the information and send it in. But what I'm confused about is that today's world or a world after the flood project's built? Because after the flood project's built, presumably you're going to lower those levels. So you'd be sent a different story, I think, depending.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, we are lowering, the flood project lowers the floodplain.
Right, but so the story that you package up and send is presuming the flood project's built and you've lowered the levels. The story today, and for the next, what you just said, 10 or 18 years, is it's not built, so we have this floodplain to deal with. I just wanted to get that clarified, that it's not just, we pass all these things, and then you send something to FEMA.
In my feeble brain, if I'm picking up on your question, if we were to submit a FEMA application today, it would look vastly different than the one we would submit at the end of the flood project.
Right, just wanted to get that
I want to
clarified, thank you.
they would be vastly different. They would be a request to FEMA, but they wouldn't be the same. In other words, we would take the existing conditions as we have today. There's about 7 different profiles that we have to send, water surface profiles that we have to send to FEMA to get them to buy off on a remap. And then if we have a proposed condition, which then becomes the built project, we have now more profiles we have to send. And that's just part of the package. That's mechanical. We could do that. It's an easy thing to do. It just takes a little bit of time.
Commissioner Burke-Bigler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Madam Chair. I'm curious how you're going to sell this to the public.
Well, part of the stipulation is I really can't sell it to the public. All I can do is give and disseminate information, and that's how I intend on doing it. I intend on, like I said, going on a public speaking effort and talking to as many people as possible so they have the most correct information, so that they have the benefit of what you have gotten today. They hear from me what we're going to do. And we'll charge our very fledgling small staff up, and we will do this, all of us will go out into the community and do that. There will most likely be, just like the RTC question 5, there was a committee of interested parties that wanted to basically see the passage of RTC question 5. And they will do what they do, and it will be without us. All I can do is disseminate information and explain things. People don't want it, then people don't want it. And I don't have a problem with that, as long as they have the correct information. There's a lot of incorrect information floating out there. It's perhaps the reason why you asked for me to come and give this update, so that you would know where we are and what's going on. And then you can make your decision. I look at a community, and maybe I shouldn't opine on this, but I look at a community on what it does for its citizens and how it treats its citizens. If it allows its citizens to have to muck out their shops every 10 to 15 years because it floods, I don't think that's really good. I just don't. And so am I in favor of building this project? Absolutely. I'm ready to retire. I am old enough to do that. And part of the reason why I haven't yet is because I feel that it's a service that I owe to, whoops, that wasn't supposed to happen. Oh, there's your Ocean Nino map. Don't look at that, please. But part of the reason why I haven't is because, as part of my giving back to a community, something that it desperately needs, I think I could do that. And I've told the elected officials that basically nominated me to this position that I could do it, and I'm going to do it as best as I can.
Councilwoman Jordan?
Thank you. Could you give me a brief comparison of the timelines of the fee versus the ballot initiative?
When you say timeline, in other words, when we're going to enact the fee?
Well, yes, just tell me, clearly we need to go back to the flood board has to chew on it and come back with a recommendation.
Correct.
And then just like a time process, how long would that potentially, if that's the direction the board goes?
Well, we're going to have legal requirements. I'm looking at our attorney and I'm thinking it'll probably take us 3 months, maybe 4 months to ready a fee that the board can hear. And it would be ready sometime in the summer. I will always mention the way that we would expect to do this is that they would pay a direct benefit fee. We would enact it sometime in this summer. So by the time that the citizens go to the ballot box, that they would know that the flood board has already enacted the fee and it's ready to be collected, but not being collected until the citizens vote yes.
Okay, now I'm not referring to the sales tax, the direct imposed fee.
Yeah, we'll do it this summer, but we won't start collecting it until we get through all the ballot question and the state passage of the sales tax, so that the fees are collected simultaneously. Well, not fees, but so that the fee and the tax are collected simultaneously. One will not be ahead of the other. So once the state passes the sales tax, and that happens, then that will trigger the collection of the fee.
Okay. Well, and I just my final
I
comment.
know maybe I'm not explaining it correctly, but I.
No, you are. I was trying to get to the comparative timelines between the two options. And I think you kind of answered that for me. I do have to say that while RTC was successful in their fee, I have great concern with this killing all initiatives, including for our schools, by just loading the ballot with sales tax increases. So.
Okay. Any further comments? Any public comments, Madam Secretary, again?
None at this time, Mr. Vice Mayor.
I'll look for an acceptance of the presentation by Reno.
Second.
Motion and second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. Mayor Martini?
Sparks, motion.
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed unanimously.
Washoe County Commission.
So moved.
I got a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Just closing off item G1, moving on to item H, comments, general comments from the dais from either jurisdictions. Yes, Councilwoman Bybee.
This would be in reference to possibly a subject on future concurrent meeting, or maybe a discussion that I'd like to open up with the other entities, and I could do that, we could do that with each group. But I wanted to throw out a conversation on Star Spangled Sparks as a regional involvement to an event that could be going away. We are in danger of losing our fireworks possibly after this year due to the financial obligations that are right now, basically whether the Nugget is going to continue to support this or not. And I wanted to reach out to the other entities as the only regional 4th of July fireworks celebration, and a possibility of working together to see how we could make sure that we keep fireworks in our region. Thank you.
Okay. Councilwoman Jordan.
Thank you. As the chair of the Special Events Committee for the City of Reno, I would love to have that conversation. We talked at length Thursday and Friday during our special events meeting, where we have seen another year of 30% increases in special events in our region, over a percentage increase of 40% the year prior, about the need to talk regionally about our special events, particularly when we talk about the big legacy events and how we can work cooperatively to discuss their sustainability, their funding, because the community doesn't care where the line is. They just know there's a special event and they want to make sure that they can enjoy it. So I absolutely support having a discussion on how we can talk regionally about some of these special events.
Commissioner Hartung.
Thank you. I'd like to add an item, and I think we've already talked about this in a number of boards, about how we deal with effluent regionally, and what we're doing with it, and what we would plan to do with it in the future, and the levels that we'd like to potentially treat it to, what can go in the river, and what we should use elsewhere. Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor.
Looking to my left, seeing none, close agenda item H. Moving on to item I, public comment. Madam Secretary, do you have any public comments?
None, Mr. Vice Mayor.
Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to speak? See none, we'll close item I. Moving on to item J, Reno. Can I have an adjournment, please? I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. Mayor Martini.
Motion to adjourn.
Moved and seconded, all in favor, say aye. Opposed, passed unanimously.
Commissioner Lucy.
Washoe County Commission, got a motion, got a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, motion passes unanimously.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good day.
We are adjourned.
Be safe.